The year is 2010. You walk into GameStop ready to buy the new hit video game Call of Duty Black Ops. The room is bustling with people who are all trying to get the brand new game. You point at the case for the game for Call of Duty Black Ops for the Xbox 360. The cashier behind the counter looks to you and says, "You'll need someone 17 or older to purchase this." So you either look up to your mom, your dad, your older brother, or maybe your cousin, and they open up their wallet and the cashier hands you the game and says, "Enjoy." The year is 2024. You walk into GameStop, grab a copy of Call of Duty Black Ops 6. With a hint of nostalgia, you bring the game up to the counter. This time, you're a little bit taller than you were before. You hand the game over to the cashier, and he looks at you and says, "Cash or card, sir?" We have officially made it to Call of Duty 22, or Call of Duty Black Ops 6. In some ways, it feels kind of wild to say that out loud. It's an extremely impressive and yet somewhat sobering realization. There's not a ton of franchises out there that manage to be a hit for 6 straight releases, and even if they do, they're usually not subgenres like in the case of Call of Duty Black Ops 6. That'd be like if Halo Wars got 6 games just on its own. I mean, Black Ops as a brand just happened to be the game they wanted to make originally as a standalone title. It was never intended to become this indispensable piece of the branding for Call of Duty, and yet Treyarch, ever since the success of the original Black Ops game back in 2010, have never strayed from that path since. Infinity Ward, on the other hand, have actually tried their hand at a couple of different things. After making the insanely successful Modern Warfare franchise, they would eventually decide to move on to other things and attempt some creatively novel ideas for the Call of Duty brand that have never been done before. This appeared as games like Ghost. While admittedly not too far of a departure from Modern Warfare thematically, it took a totally different and bad approach to storytelling.
We have to go back. Our dad's down there and we're not leaving without him.
That's real admirable of you. But your father's not there anymore.
Dad, this whole time you were one of them. You're a ghost.
By the way, this clip will never not be hilarious to me. I had to put it in the video. If it wasn't obvious, I don't really care for COD Ghost all that much, but they would also make Infinite Warfare, a game taking place in the far future, spanning across different planets, and this game was met with, let's just say, some criticism. Eventually, it appeared that Infinity Ward learned their lessons from these 2 prior failures and went back to their roots, a reboot of the series that made them so popular to begin with, Modern Warfare.
No, you idiot. You know what the answer is. Recognizable IPs!
Now, despite my personal feelings on both of these games, I don't really care for Ghosts, but I think Infinite Warfare was flawed yet had some redeeming qualities, but I think it seems reasonable enough that after 2 overall stinkers according to the community, Infinity Ward would want to go back a bit and lean on what they know and what made them great, necessarily, and revitalize it for the next generation. The GameStop analogy I used earlier illustrates that a teenager that couldn't buy Call of Duty Modern Warfare back in 2007 is not the same teenager that couldn't buy Call of Duty Modern Warfare in 2019. The point is, in some sense, it was Modern Warfare for a totally new generation. I say this because the reality of the situation is that we're all starting to get a little bit older, and things that appealed to us when we were younger may be a little bit different than they are now. However, I'm not going to give you the same speech that you hear all the time everywhere else. I'm not going to tell you that merely getting older means that you can't enjoy things deeply anymore. On the contrary, in some ways, you can enjoy things more deeply now, just in a different way. And I'm also not going to say that video games fall into the old equals good and new equals bad, because I don't really believe that at all. As someone who's grown up with Call of Duty my entire life, while I generally do hold a lot of the older titles in high favor, that doesn't mean that they were all necessarily good back then either. In fact, there are aspects to modern Call of Duty that greatly appeal to me more as a gamer, and I feel have been objective improvements to the product as well, and of course, there are aspects that completely and totally miss the mark for me too.
All right. What kind of life savings you got?
However, with Black Ops 6, it's a bit of a complicated case. It's a little bit more of an incredible disaster, and I mean that in both ways. It's a game that is actually some of the best Call of Duty we've gotten in quite a while, yet at the same time might be a game that fundamentally misunderstands the spirit of Black Ops and has been plagued by some chronic and deep problematic issues its whole lifespan. Black Ops 6 has made me realize that in some ways, Call of Duty will truly never be like it was before. Some of the elements that made those old games great for me and truly special are gone now and likely will be forever, but at the same time, it's brought along new elements that have made me fall in love with the series all over again continually, just in a different way. Black Ops 6, to me, is truly a beautiful disaster.
Stop being sheep and become wolves.
Open your eyes.
Open your eyes. Soon, the truth will be revealed.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Do you remember after Modern Warfare 2 when it would be announced that the next game would be yet another Infinity Ward title? This was a really weird situation because traditionally, Call of Duty has handed off dev years in a pattern. Infinity Ward 1 year, then Treyarch back and forth until a third, Sledgehammer Games, was introduced. Then it would be IW, Sledge, and then Treyarch, and back around again. We would have this until rumors of a year 2 for Modern Warfare 2 started to crop up. The plan was that MW2 would have a second-year premium expansion pack that, content-wise, was the equivalent of a brand new game. This would have been monumental for Call of Duty because they haven't not had an annual release in like forever, so this would have marked a shift in trajectory for the franchise. However, this plan was walked back at some point, and Activision decided to move forward and release a brand new game with Modern Warfare 3, and for a while, I thought this was just like a one-off decision, but with Black Ops 6 coming out and the whole idea of, okay, these guys were working on this game for 4 years, and this is what they managed to come out with, it all starts to kind of make sense, and I don't know why it took me so long to connect the dots, but I think I figured out what's going on here. Activision essentially figured out a way to double dip on games. It's easy to look at Black Ops 6 at launch at face value and be like, what on earth were y'all doing for this amount of time? But I think what's going on here is Activision's new strategy. You see, I think they're essentially telling a studio to make as much content as possible and to make approximately 2 years worth of content at once. And instead of doing a standalone title plus an expansion, we can take the batch of content made over these 4 years of dev time, or however long it took them, and split it up over 2, if that makes sense. My theory is that Treyarch, in the 4 years between Cold War and now, was making both Black Ops 6 and their next game, presumably Black Ops 7, simultaneously. This is what I believe happened with MW2 and MW3, obviously. Now, I'm sure Black Ops 7 was still far out on the horizon, and I'm sure Treyarch is actively working on it at the time since Black Ops 6 post-release, but you get my point. But the question then arises, is this strategy inherently a bad thing? Well, it would certainly seem like it when looking just at MW2 and MW3. The issue was that MW3 had virtually no original content, plus a 3-hour, unfinished, and extremely boring campaign. Now, to be fair, Sledgehammer did actually pull off live service surprisingly well for that game, for the most part. Modern Warfare 3 post-launch offering for most aspects of its game was pretty stellar despite the underwhelming launch. It kind of ended up finding itself near the end there, but let's be honest here, Black Ops 6 is not MW3. We at least have a full complete campaign, a pretty sizable amount of totally brand new multiplayer maps, and 2 complete fully fledged zombies maps on launch. So I mean, what could go wrong? Oh.
And
In the time since its release, Black Ops 6 has needed to contend with some very unique setbacks and issues. Even though this game has apparently been the most successful Call of Duty launch title to date, it's also struggled in some areas to retain a lot of those players as well. If you look at Steam charts, it paints sort of a grim picture, and it looks dramatic, but it's not really the whole story. Steam numbers are only one small part of the overall player base. In fact, Steam is the smallest portion of the COD pie, most of COD's audience are still on console, where it was, yet again, #1 in annual sales. So the problem is not that Call of Duty doesn't sell well, and it's not exactly a player count issue. So what's going on with this dramatic decrease? Well, Black Ops 6 would be the first ever Call of Duty game to be free to play if you have Xbox Game Pass. You see, a few years ago, Microsoft moved to acquire Activision, and in doing so are free to utilize the IP however they want to. And with the gaming industry as of late really trying to push subscriptions and games as a service, Microsoft putting BO6 on Game Pass meant that literally anyone can pick it up and try out the premium experience, when before this was only Warzone being the free-to-play element of Call of Duty. And as they say, easy come, easy go. I'm sure Microsoft got tons of brand new people who don't normally play COD, or maybe even at all, because it's just a non-committal way to play video games and not require a significant investment of time or money. When it's a hot new game, tons of people are probably downloading it just to try it out with their friends for a bit, or maybe beat the campaign or something and just be done. This is what I think largely explains a lot of the player count fluctuations, at least in its first initial ebbs and flows. The point here is, even though it's one of the biggest talking points used by people to claim that Call of Duty is dying, I don't think it's really quite as dramatic as it's made to sound. Now, the whole putting Xbox on Game Pass thing is kind of a complicated topic, and I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of it. It seems like a way to just artificially inflate player count numbers to make Call of Duty look like it's doing better than it is, to make shareholders happy, etc., etc. I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of that. I don't really care for games as a subscription, to be quite honest, but at the same time, these numbers really don't show that Call of Duty's dying. People have been using that as a talking point for over 10 years, and here we still are. But okay, what about AI? Activision and its studios have been using AI to generate all sorts of things, whether this be a microtransaction bundle skin, an LTM in-game promotional image, y'all remember this damn Santa thing, or even using AI to generate landscapes and in-game art allegedly. Now, this subject is tricky. Treyarch did have job postings a couple of years back hiring people familiar with using AI, and I called this a few years ago in a review video I made on Modern Warfare 2. It just has that uncanny AI-generated feel to it.
I say Modern Warfare 2's AI is systemic.
I understand this is the direction that games are taking, and that AI is only going to become more and more prevalent rather than less as time goes on, and they talk about how much AI influences their game and even brag about it.
The AI to engage with the environment.
The AI helps player be more immersed in the game.
Back then, it was a lot more, under the radar, and it wasn't this big thing. Like, the word AI wasn't this scary thing a couple of years ago like it is now, but I figured this would become more and more of a problem as time passed. But it reached a bit of a fork in the road. Now, I'm not going to sit here today and argue the ethics of using AI to make video games. That's not exactly what this video is for. Generally speaking, I'm very against using AI at all for video games, but that's not exactly the point. The thing is, it's been used as a scapegoat as to why Black Ops 6 player count was falling off. I personally think this is absolutely absurd. Once again, I don't personally agree with them using it, nor do I think it's okay, but the average everyday gamer either doesn't know, is completely oblivious to, or simply does not care that AI is being used in small or big ways. There's not a whole bunch of players who are quitting purely for their own morals that they're standing up for or whatever. Truth is, either most people just simply don't know or don't seem to care right now. So no, Treyarch or Activision using AI is also not the reason people have stopped playing the game as of late. It's also just as likely that this is the Call of Duty cycle at play. Game comes out, it's hype, in 3 months, everyone hates it, the game sucks, and then get hyped for next COD. Then years later, look back at it in retrospect and go, this game really wasn't that bad. It's just how this thing goes. I've seen it for literally almost 20 years now. Not that Black Ops 6 is perfect and is immune to any criticism, but I'm also not convinced that we're in any worse position with this game than we've been in years past. But just for the record, the AI stuff is absurd, and I reject the proposition wholeheartedly that we should embrace AI in gaming. Not pushing back on this now, I think, will lead us down some very dark and dystopian roads. Not to go too far off on this tangent, but I philosophically disagree with the efficacy of AI making anything beautiful at all. AI is theoretically limitless. The idea is that it's infinitely able to generate generate new things. Sure, AI can create anything the imagination wants to without limits, but in the context of video games, I think it's inherently the creation of something magnificent despite our limitations is what humans find beautiful. A stained glass window in a beautiful cathedral that took hundreds of years to make, made by humans with their own limitations, were able to make something so magical and incredible. That's true beauty, and that's magical. This is pure slop. Now, despite my deep philosophical disagreements when utilizing AI in games, Black Ops 6 has at least shown some restraint, kind of, or at least it could be way worse. What's genuinely hilarious and ironic is that in the Black Ops 6 zombie storyline, there is an AI named Sam who mimics the real Samantha Maxis who's trapped in the dark ether, and in real life, Julie Nathanson, the real Samantha voice actor, boycotted Activision and the SAG-AFTRA strike. So this is where it's crazy. In both real life and in the game, it's about the real Samantha Maxis being replaced by an AI. Now, contrary to what you may have heard, the new Samantha voice is a real person and not AI. It's just not Julie anymore. But if you can't see the incredible amounts of irony in all this, I don't know what else would be more on the nose.
It's not Sam. It can't be Sam.
I do sound like Agent Maxis.
She was my source code. The true Samantha Maxis sacrificed herself to save your world.
But in any case, despite some of these really annoying and unfortunate things going on in the periphery for Black Ops 6, I would go so far as to say that I think this has been the overall best Treyarch launch title probably since Black Ops 3. BO4 had no campaign at all and had tons of stability issues at launch. Black Ops Cold War had like 6 or 7 MP maps total and 1 zombies map when it launched, and Black Ops 6 on the other hand has a full campaign, tons of brand new MP maps, plus its innovation of Omni movement, 2 fully loaded zombies maps. But while that's all great, it's the individual quality of these things that really matter. And this is where it starts to get a bit more interesting, because I think Treyarch absolutely nailed it in some areas. I also feel like it's a studio that, like I said at the beginning of the video, just fundamentally misunderstands Black Ops and what it really is. I feel like the marketing for this game was also somewhat misleading, or I was expecting something a bit different when it came out to how they were presenting the game with the pre-launch material. You know, all the truth lies stuff and the whole idea that you have to question everything and who you can really trust at all. But honestly, I don't really get the same energy and sense very much when playing the single player experience. There's so much damn aura radiating from these initial reveal trailers and all these historical figures, but strangely, a lot of this stuff is just mostly absent from the actual contents of the game. And it's also important context that both in the Cold War campaign and Black Ops 6 were both developed by Raven, with oversight from Treyarch, of course, but I think they were largely directed and produced by Raven Software. Now, this might explain why I feel like they just don't really understand Black Ops and the appeal of some of those original experiences. With every single original Black Ops campaign, they were pushing right to the very edge. The edge of what was technically doable, but more importantly, the edge of storytelling.
Either as Black Ops and probably first at World at War, there was a certain maturity and tone that we were defining for ourselves that was very Treyarch, that was very different. You know, the IW stuff was very, and I don't mean to throw any shade. It was quite a jingoistic thing. It was kind of rah rah America. It was kind of had this very military thing, which is great, right? Very solid. We were starting to do the twist of like, well, maybe which is also an American thing, which is like maybe you don't know the truth. Maybe the truth is behind the scenes in some way. Yeah. And that allowed us to get a flavor and a tone, especially when you're dealing with some of the more kind of questionable parts of certain wars or certain kind of techniques. And I felt we found our niche there. And I think once we found that, first in World at War and then crystallized by Black Ops, the team then could believe it, because now there was this, well, they do their thing and we're doing our thing. And so I think what started as a rivalry and for us an insecurity slowly turned into a we're okay and we're comfortable here and they're doing their thing over there. So it's incumbent on us to take the risks and to push the line, because if you're not going to, who is going to? And it's like that means going to the edge, right? And that was always very important for me, which was what we're doing
Think about Black Ops 1 and how that campaign pushed boundaries for the COD series, and then think about Black Ops 2 and that campaign and all of the risk with its nuances and captivating moments, and even Black Ops 3, the one that Treyarch admitted wasn't really working, so they just went and tried something insane because they had to put something out there. As deeply flawed as that one was, they all still have moments that captivate you and linger in your mind, even days after playing it, but I just don't feel that way with Black Ops Cold War or Black Ops 6, and I think I know why. My sense is that Raven fundamentally gets the world of Black Ops, right? Like, they get the literal events and the timeline and the characters and stuff like that, but I don't think they understand that the spirit of Black Ops, as it were, is the art of pushing the boundaries of storytelling. And to be completely fair to Raven, I actually like the Cold War campaign, and I like a lot of Black Ops 6. I think they're solid and they're competent, but they're nothing groundbreaking like the original Treyarch trilogy were. Big picture, I think that the gameplay of the Black Ops 6 campaign is actually fantastic, and perhaps the best campaign gameplay-wise we've ever gotten. But for a Black Ops game, storytelling-wise, I'm incredibly disappointed at the approach and its methods of the storytelling delivery. And it's also a bit of a problem because they're kind of constrained by the material that they have to work around in order for the Black Ops timeline and universe to make sense. Those original games, you know, they kind of just made whatever they want, but Raven is now forced to color inside the lines with this one, so to speak. So I can't judge them too harshly, I suppose, but to kind of put this into perspective, the only way that I can describe the Black Ops 6 campaign is that it's a modern warfare campaign trying its best to imitate a Black Ops campaign.
You guys see the Great Escape?
Yeah, you didn't make it out.
We will. If we can't outgun them, we outrun them.
Like, it has all the bones and the structure and the storytelling of a modern warfare campaign, but it's doing its best to imitate the idea of Black Ops and be in that universe. But it's missing the spirit of Black Ops, which was pushing storytelling to the very edge. Whether it works out or not, they were always pushing the boundaries. But I don't think this one pushes the boundaries. Neither did Cold War. Those were playing it safe, so to speak, and maybe that's fine. Maybe that's their approach. But to me, that's why it doesn't feel like Black Ops. But this campaign is quite complicated to talk about, and in order to understand where it shines and where it fails for me, we need to analyze this one a little bit more closely. All right, so let's begin by establishing where exactly Black Ops 6 in its story falls. Remember how I said that the Modern Warfare universe got a reboot, meaning the original COD 4, MW2, and MW3 are in a completely separate timeline to Modern Warfare, MW2, and MW3 from 2023. Well, that's not really the case with Black Ops 6. All of the Treyarch games are still canon to one timeline. So let's take a look at this very well planned out and not confusing at all timeline and events of the Black Ops series. Are you ready? All right, let's see if I can get this right the first time. The first canon game in the Black Ops timeline is technically World at War. This is where some of our important characters were introduced, like Viktor Reznov, for example. The next game would be Black Ops 1. Makes sense so far. Then the next game in the timeline after Black Ops 1 is actually Black Ops 5, aka Cold War. Then after Black Ops 5, aka Cold War, comes Black Ops 6, which takes place just a few years later. Then after Black Ops 6 comes Black Ops 2. Yo, they made Black Ops 2. What's next? Black Ops 3? No. After Black Ops 2 comes Black Ops 7, aka Treyarch's next game. After Black Ops 7 comes Black Ops 4, which was originally supposed to be a sequel to Black Ops 3, but in reality is a prequel to Black Ops 3. That all makes perfect sense, right? Okay, I know that was kind of crazy, but just to be clear, Black Ops 6 takes place after the events of Cold War, but before Black Ops 2. That's all you need to know for now. So now that we've nailed down where exactly we are on this kind of ridiculous timeline, as a quick reminder, Cold War ends with Adler taking our player character named Bell, and then them shooting each other before it cuts to black.
I just want you to know that this little thing that's happened with you and me, it was always for the greater good. You're a goddamn hero, you know that, kid. Heroes have to make sacrifices. That's why when I ask you for one more, I hope you understand. It was never personal.
Now, this campaign is kind of confusing, and it's a bit tricky to try to make sense of it all because there's so many different characters and tangents introduced that a lot of them ultimately lead to nothing, so we're going to try to skim those out a little bit and try to make sense of what the important stuff is going on in this campaign. The thing with this campaign is that there are just simply a lot of details that are just not relevant, so I'm going to try my best to distill what is the most crucial here. So we open up this campaign in Black Ops 6 in a debriefing room where a man named Daniel Livingston is chewing out the team to ask what just happened. In the room, there are some of our new characters to the story. We have a newcomer named Troy Marshall. We also have one Jane Harrow, our player character, who the group refers to as Case, and of course, the Frank Woods appears as well. In the opening mission, our team is attempting to apprehend a known terrorist named Alawi, who is in communication with Saddam Hussein. Livingston is trying to press the team on exactly what happened and why Alawi was killed. So as the retelling goes, Troy Marshall, Jane Harrow, and Case made their way battling through Iraqi soldiers and eventually found Alawi, but slips out that somebody from the CIA was supposed to bail him out.
CIA? We had a deal. Deal? Not with us. Where you headed? Colorado, you lied. Your man was getting me out. Man? Who exactly? That us?
No, not Iraqi either.
Pantheon. We need to leave.
Troy Marshall and Jane Harrow, understandably confused by this, but before he can investigate any further, some new forces show up who are not CIA nor Iraqi. Alawi claims this group to be called the Pantheon, and extremely dangerous at that. So Jane, Troy, and Chase with Alawi try to escape to a different exfil point with him. When arriving on the scene, big man Russell Adler hops out of his whip and absolutely demolishes Alawi without even a second of hesitation.
Everyone all right?
Is this your... No!
Adler!
Stand down!
And just a few moments after the team apprehends Adler for killing their target, Adler says this.
I got a message for Woods.
Oh, yeah?
Tell him Bishop takes Rook.
So this is our initial setup for the game, a little mystery. Why did Adler kill Alawi? Why did he say that he had someone in the CIA? Who is Pantheon? These are all questions that look to be explored in this game. Now, before we continue with story, I do want to shift gears real quick and talk about gameplay, because I recall saying that in my Black Ops Cold War campaign review that I really enjoy the adventure game aspects that they integrated, a lot of that being, player-controlled choice, multi-option level interaction, and so on. Cold War actually had very little point-and-shoot gameplay when I think about it, which for some people was a drawback, but to compensate, it did have many unique missions and sequences. I expected Black Ops 6 to be somewhat similar, since Raven seemed like they found an approach they liked. Black Ops 6 structurally is very similar to Cold War, where after the first mission, instead of going to the safe house, you end up at the Rook in Bulgaria. This is an abandoned KGB safe house that contains its own secrets and mysteries.
Adler brought us here for a reason. To stop the Pantheon before they strike. To do that, Woods believes we'll need him back. That won't be easy. But Adler left a name to follow. It's a good place to start.
Now, the Rook serves both as a break in between missions where you can go and talk to characters, explore a little bit, unlock weapon and character and gear upgrades using money that you find in the world and potentially even inside the Rook itself, and uncover many deep and dark secrets that reveal a lot about what's happening in the greater narrative of the story. From a gameplay standpoint, the Rook is the safe house in Cold War, just far more interesting and complicated and with more to do. For example, in order to access access upgrades such as enhanced combat abilities or what are otherwise perks or upgrades to equipment used in the field, you've got to purchase these workstations and then can individually invest in a handful of unique upgrades to build and complement your personal playstyle. This is similar to ideas we've seen in campaigns past. It's honestly most like the EXO upgrade system from Call of Duty Advanced Warfare as far as the upgrades you're going after and how they work and the currency as well. You might find a note in the shed that points you in the right direction to the piano, which will help you unlock secret rooms downstairs. The only thing I've still not really been able to understand is the elevator. I'm going to assume that this is cut content because as far as I'm aware, the elevator doesn't actually do anything in game whatsoever. But if you do access this secret layer in the basement of the Rook, you find that this secret faction of the KGB were doing their own testing, and it teaches you a bunch of different puzzles that you might find throughout the rest of the campaign. You have these different computer logs where you got to match numbers to letters, there's word puzzles, and all kinds of really neat stuff down here. If you look close enough, you might even find some letters talking about Nikita Dragovich from Black Ops 1 story. Regardless of whatever you're doing, the point is the Rook has lots of neat little secrets and puzzles to uncover and immerse yourself to find more details on the narrative that also give you some gameplay benefits at the same time. I really like the Rook. It reminds me a lot of the safehouse in Black Ops 3, but the Rook secrets are much more in the foreground and, kind of meant for you to be discovered, as opposed to the truly obscure depth to the Black Ops 3 safehouse secrets. Black Ops 3 safehouse has this computer codex that had a secret menu accessed only found and discovered as recently as a year ago. So there's a lot of obscure depth that didn't really get uncovered here, but the Rook is kind of meant for you to uncover these puzzles, which as far as for the general player goes is probably better, but from the Rook you can go to the board and select your next mission. Another difference to Cold War is that there are no more side missions. Cold War would occasionally have these levels that weren't mandatory but could help you uncover more clues if you wanted to and chase down these secret, VIP targets. Gameplay wise, they really weren't anything special, but they were there if you wanted to play them and kind of, exist in this world for a little bit longer. Black Ops 6 only has main missions, and the majority of them are linear, scripted, traditional Call of Duty levels, except for just one. One more closely resembles the open combat levels in Modern Warfare 3, but these are done much better, but we'll get to that later. So anyways, after the initial setup introducing Jane Harrow, Case, Livingston, Marshall, Woods, and so on, we finally arrive at the Rook, this abandoned KGB safe house that was used by a smaller secret group within Soviet forces. The Rook is also fairly interesting narratively because your initial thought is why does Adler know about this place exactly? After being allegedly framed for the Panama incident, the same one that had Hudson and Woods being captured by Raul Menendez and Alex Mason being killed in the process, and it's exactly how Woods ended up in that wheelchair to begin with. Adler is attempting to clear his name as he claims that there's a mole in the CIA who still hasn't been uncovered, who is still operating, and with Adler being potentially falsely framed for this fiasco, it's clear that Adler has some complicated motivations. Now, I'm going to be honest, the only characters that actually have anything interesting going on, in my opinion, are Adler, Case, and Harrow. This is a case in point example where, again, I think Raven Software, despite their best efforts, just don't quite get Black Ops. They understand the literal timeline and the events of that universe, sure, but I don't feel like the spirit of what makes a game Black Ops is really present here, because you can just feel it. I'm sure many of you have had the same experiences as me, where I literally called the twist of this game from the very first mission. They try to set up Livingston as the bad guy in the beginning because of his tough demeanor and easy to paint target, but it's so blatantly obvious that it's Harrow literally in the first 10 minutes. In fact, she's the only one that's not really joining you on missions past the first level. It's so telegraphed that she would be the one ultimately working with Pantheon that you spend 75% of the game building to this moment that's ultimately underwhelming. So it was a lot harder to be immersed when I know there's going to be this plot point that I know is going to play out in a certain way, but you have to get through so much fluff in order to get to it. But the reveal of Harrow being in Pantheon Pantheon comes much later. Before we can even get there, the first few missions see Case going to a couple of different locations and operations to recruit some allies to uncover the truth about the CIA, Pantheon, and even Adler. The first person recruited is Savati Dumas. She was an ex-guild member of Avalon and wants revenge on her prior employers and abusers, and has Case help her in that mission. I truly enjoy the gameplay structure of these missions. I quite like the low-key cloak and dagger stuff, right? They're trying to introduce these relatively advanced stealth mechanics for Call of Duty, and it's a bit of a nice touch. One of my favorite missions is actually the Bill Clinton rally for that very reason. It's got a good mix of everything: stealth, dialogue choices, action, secrets, all culminating in a grand moment at the end. This mission is what I was expecting more of the Black Ops 6 campaign to be. It actually references some of those real-life historical figures, giving it some kind of weight, and again, having some of my favorite elements and attributes of COD mission structure ever. This level ultimately ends with you finding and discovering a secret CIA black site where Russell Adler is being held captive, and we go in to rescue him. Upon Adler's rescue, we get back to the Rook, and he goes to recruit Felix Newman. So now our team is Savati Dumas, Troy Marshall, Case, Adler, and Frank Woods. And the whole time we have a few questions we're pondering while we're rescuing Savati Dumas and Felix Newman. Who is Pantheon? Who are they comprised of? Is Livingston behind it? Who is Case? The other thing about this campaign that is both a positive and kind of a negative for this one specifically is the amount of dialogue and talking there is in the Rook. Every single character, pretty much after all of the missions, you can go up to and have extended dialogue sequences, either with, Troy Marshall or Adler or even Woods. You can get tons of information about them as a person, and you can ask them what they think is really going on. And while this stuff is very much appreciated, I honestly think a lot of this is just information overload, where much of it ends up being pointless. I think back to some of the campaigns, specifically like Black Ops 2 or 3, where there is virtually no wasted dialogue at all. Every single word spoken, for the most part, serves the greater function of the story. It all ends and leads to something somewhere, and it's just kind of a shame and a little bit ironic because these characters have so much to say, but that doesn't make up for the fact that none of them, besides maybe like a couple, are very interesting at all, and there's nothing particularly interesting going on at this moment. The only time the plot kind of kicks into gear where something gets interesting is in the Iraq mission. Now, I mentioned we would talk about this one because it is the first and only mission in Call of Duty to be an open world campaign level. Now, it is similar to the open combat missions from MW3, but also not really. I absolutely hated those missions just conceptually. They did not work at all, and I think that's for a lot of reasons, but the one in Black Ops 6 is quite different. Essentially, you have this very large world with all of these different POIs, and fundamentally, you have to destroy 3 different SAM sites, and they're all at different spots on the map, but in the meantime, you can go and investigate and explore different, safe houses or, little encampments to either get rewards or even some intel. If you're being vigilant and thorough and you're cleaning out some of the optional areas, you may just come across a little radio that's inside a box, and you'll start to listen to a recording from a laboratory of some sorts in which they're logging their experimentation and results of a certain chemical biological agent.
Day 1 of the October trials. Our 2 subjects, brothers, began exposure. Patient A through injection, and patient B through inhalation. Their pupils are dilated, but vitals are stable. Results to follow.
And for the first time in the entire campaign so far, this was the first moment I felt like the storytelling method became somewhat interesting. I really enjoyed the idea of going to these very optional sites. You didn't have to participate in these at all, but you start to get a bit more context on the scientists and researchers that are using this biological agent that ends up being Cradle. And so all of this starts to put the pieces together a little bit. You suspect that Cradle and Pantheon may be connected, and some some of the people behind Pantheon, who could be some of your closest compatriots, also might know something about this agent called Cradle. In any case, I want to talk about the gameplay of this open world mission briefly, because I think this works a lot better than open combat levels. Both of these ultimately have this mandatory objective that you have to complete before moving on, but Black Ops 6 is kind of the natural evolution of that original draft, where there's more to do, the world feels more alive, there's even a fast travel system, you can, clear out these encampments and get kill streaks for your next one and stuff like that. There's a lot of content to participate in, and you don't have to do like 90% of it, but it's fun. I'm not going to say it's anything groundbreaking, but I actually applaud them for having this one and only open combat mission in here and not doing it anywhere else in the game. It's fine in small doses, and I think it's actually solid here. My only real gripe with this mission is the reintroduction of Park for seemingly no reason at all. Typically, Black Ops campaigns wouldn't introduce a character unless they were somehow crucial to the overall arc that was unfolding, or they had some kind of storyline purpose that would pay off later. And I guess Park kind of does, but to me, it feels like what they did in the Modern Warfare campaigns, where they shoehorned Farah in without her having any kind of real purpose to be in that story. It was there just for the sake of fan service, for lack of a better word. And while this doesn't outright break my enjoyment or immersion, right? Like, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a little bit of an annoyance, and it just feels very forced and contrived. To be clear, I really like Park. I think she's an excellent character, but she sadly just doesn't have much to do in this story. And it's like, why is she even here? And it's exactly why I said I feel like this campaign is a Modern Warfare campaign doing its best imitation of a Black Ops campaign. Where the Black Ops 6 story really starts to kick into gear is the mission where Case and Marshall head to an abandoned shell facility, this advanced research technology company in Kentucky that houses a biological testing facility underneath. Things go wrong when Case falls through the elevator shaft and all the way down to the bottom floor of the facility, where it's very clearly abandoned and congested in this toxic gas. Now, with a broken gas mask, Case begins to hallucinate. This sequence reveals Case's prior involvement with the Cradle program and even being Case 1.
It's for you.
It's fantastic to see you again, Case 1. How have you been feeling?
The first subject to have Cradle used on him in an attempt to make super soldiers. The gameplay of this mission down in the biotech labs is honestly really fun. Admittedly, as a zombies player, being deeply familiar with all of these different enemies that you encounter definitely made the threat feel a bit less intimidating because, you're already kind of familiar with it, but it's an amazing sequence and introduction regardless, and I can imagine if you've never played zombies before, encountering these monsters would be otherworldly, and it's a fantastic level gameplay-wise, and you get lots more details on the unfolding narrative. We now know that Case has been here before, and he was the very first patient in the Cradle program. It's likely the CIA was interested in using this biotech as a means of generating super soldiers, but after a disaster took place, it would be abandoned and locked away. And it's heavily implied that Case was actually the reason for this disaster unfolding. After slowly but surely revealing what the Cradle program really is and Case's involvement in the origins of this all, Case continues to crash out until the Black Ops team are able to subdue him and Marshall is able to get him back to his senses a little bit and return to normal. And after this, it would turn out that Newman was able to crack the cryptography of a secret video file, and the team are able to watch it and uncover the truth about what really happened.
It's a biological weapon. You know this already.
Keep watching.
Is it faster this time?
Faster, yes. And more aggressive, as requested.
Like I said, this moment didn't really hit. It fell really flat for me because I saw this coming from Mission 1, and it becomes clear that for some reason or another, Jane Harrow is actually one part of Pantheon and not Livingston as they suspected prior. Why she joined Pantheon is still yet to be revealed, but now in trying to get closer to Harrow and the truth about Pantheon, we have possibly my favorite mission in the game. The crew is going to a Lutazzi casino in which each character uses their unique skill sets assets to outsmart and outmaneuver the guild. I love this mission and it has tons of great little moments. This is one of those rare times where it feels like they're actually utilizing the characters and the cast to their fullest potential. I feel like we have so many different characters in the story, but most of the time none of them have really much to do. This is that one exception where it feels like everybody's being utilized with their proper personality and skill set in a way that fits and works well. The team also is tasked on tracking down Gusev. This was one of the scientists working and developing the Cradle program, so Case, along with Adler and Sims from the Cold War campaign, appear here to nail him down. Now, I do want to point something out here, kind of weird, I thought was sort of odd. There's a couple of instances in this campaign where the cutscene quality is clearly not finished. You look at the quality between this one that's definitely finished and the one in this mission, I literally had to restart my game because I thought somehow like my textures got messed up or whatever, so I kept reloading this mission and reloading this cutscene to see if it would like kick into its full quality, but it looks like this one is not finished, which is fine. It's just kind of jarring when you have one of these come up compared to what you're visually used to throughout the rest of the campaign. Honestly, I wouldn't even care that much if every cutscene in the game was this quality. Sure, it might look a little silly, but like we're used to that with older COD games. It's just not consistent is my point. But anyways, Adler, Sims, and Case make their way through the airfield and then eventually chase down his plane. After capturing Gusev, this happens.
Vorkuta, former Russian prison camp. It became a bioweapon lab years ago before it was shut down. But it still has what they need to scale up production of the cradle.
That'll work. You can dispose of them.
What? No!
Enough! He told us what he knows. Getting soft in your old age, huh, Sims?
You've got your ways and I've got mine. Gusev's in my custody now.
Sims being obviously very against what Adler was going to have Case do does raise some flags. Now, like I said, the gameplay of this campaign, including most of these later missions, genuinely may be some of my favorite Call of Duty campaign stuff to date. It's so good, but unfortunately, this also means that the story suffers from a lack of focus. There's seemingly so much going on, but a lot of this is just irrelevant noise. My suspicion is that they made a ton of these levels without thinking about how it's going to fit into the overall narrative and then decided to write around that later. There's many missions, just like in a Modern Warfare campaign, where you could literally pull them out of the game, you could just slot them out from where they are, and the story and the overall narrative that's developing wouldn't really change all that much. And the other big reason I compare this to a Modern Warfare campaign is that it's structured identically to those ones, where you have mission followed by a cinematic, mission, a cinematic, and I've been saying for years how this formula needs to change a little bit. In my honest opinion, I think they need to cut back on the cinematics and only do them for really special moments and focus more on telling the story in game from the perspective of the player that really helps you connect with what's going on. That is a big part of what made stuff like Black Ops 1 and 2 so good.
So we're fucked.
So in case you're still a little bit confused and we're all on the same page at this point, the current happenings are that Case was involved in the Cradle project. Adler still thinks there's someone in the CIA who framed him for the Panama fiasco, getting Mason killed and Woods in a wheelchair. Jane Harrow, who's involved in Pantheon, are a bunch of CIA defectors, and Pantheon's goal is to unleash some kind of biological weapon and then blame the CIA for the failure and be the ones to clean up the mess and step into the power void. So that's the important stuff. Hopefully that all makes sense, because it's all crucial details for the final act of the game. The last act starts when the Black Ops team captured Jane Harrow away from her Pantheon forces. They're actually able to apprehend her and take her back to the Rook for interrogation, specifically from Russell Adler, using an injection chemical used in MK Ultra, but as Adler calls it, separation. Thus begins the interrogation of Jane Harrow. When the agent kicks in, we finally get to the moment where, in Black Ops fashion, the game goes very off the rails, and in a way that I do have to admit, I like a lot of this stuff gameplay-wise. I find it extremely interesting, and the puzzles that you need to solve are all entertaining, they're fun, and you dive deeper into her psyche to get answers, and it's executed in a phenomenal way. Also, I do feel like this moment is pretty earned, right? Other than the Cradle level, this campaign plays it pretty straight. Like, it doesn't get super crazy or anything like that up until the very end, so I do feel like when it it does get kind of wild, they've earned it. But not only do I think this is a nice finale narratively, but I also enjoy the gameplay because you now have to employ all of the lessons you've learned from the prior levels and leading up to this point. You need to employ your puzzle solving skills from earlier. You got to use your grapple skills on a parkour course in a way that contextually makes sense to what's happening. But this sequence is fairly long, and what's revealed is that Jane Harrow's parents were both CIA, and at some point a home invasion occurred, resulting in her mother and father both being killed in the conflict by a masked assailant. From that point, Jane Harrow searched far and wide for answers, and for years nothing came of it until one day an answer showed up at her door, revealing that the CIA was cleared to eliminate Jane's parents for being sensitive subjects. This project was greenlit by Emerson Black. Remember the Creed Bratton guy from Cold War? Yeah, that guy.
Does the team know about our mishap in Berlin yet?
No, but if it's connected to one of those names from Bell, they'll find out soon enough.
The last person to do this disappeared. His name?
So Jane Harrow's plan was, with a group of CIA defectors, use the intel they had on the Cradle project and affairs in the Middle East to make it look like an attack on US soil was completely missed by the incompetent and corrupt CIA, and then it would be Pantheon that would claim the void and power that would be left in such a crisis. Harrow, under the influence of separation, battles the other side of her psyche. One of them claims that it was Adler who killed her parents, but she can't seem to agree with herself about who it really was.
Targets eliminated. Targets eliminated.
I know it was. It wasn't Adler.
While all of this is taking place, Pantheon forces show up in full force to rescue Harrow. Black Ops fight them off for as long as they can before they ultimately break through, freeing Jane and injuring Woods in the process. At this point, with everyone either pinned down or too injured to fight on, it's up to Case to stop Harrow from getting away and initiating her plan of executing a cradle attack in the capital of Washington, D.C.
Case! Can't let it get away! It's up to you! Go! Go!
Kill them. Case jumps onto their escape helicopter and confronts Jane. In the scuffle, the pilot is killed and the helicopter falls down into the Black Sea. From here, Case uses a cradle canister to fight Jane. This results in it cracking and leaking the chemical agent into the helicopter. Case hears that the same female voice in his head and begins to kill Jane when she says her final words to Case. The game ends with Woods and Marshall and the team being reunited with Livingston and claiming that there's still a mole in the CIA somewhere, somebody working in the shadows, and in the final shot in the game, we see this.
Harrow may be gone, but not the Pantheon. I need you back in Avalon.
You think you're still a threat?
I do. And worse. Whatever cabal brought Harrow into the Pantheon still lives inside our house. We thought they were long gone. But it turns out, they never left.
And that's where the game ends, but a big question still remains. Pretty much everything else at this point has been resolved. We know that Jane joined Pantheon, we discovered that the Cradle program and what it was used for. The only thing we really don't know is who is Case? And who was the man at the end here? Well, luckily, we can figure this one out. The man in the final shot, if you were paying attention, is actually the same man in the corner of the room with the team in the opening cutscene. Now, to be honest, I'm not sure who this is exactly, other than that. They are the same person, but that still doesn't give me much context. I don't think we're going to truly find out who this actually is until the next Treyarch game, so I don't know if it's even really worth speculating too hard about. But either way, the last remaining unanswered unanswered question in all of this is, who was the person we spent the entire game playing as? There are no points in the game where we actually get to see Case's face at all. Whenever you do see a player model, it's completely covered in all of, a full face mask and all this gear, and we can't even see our own player model in game. Luckily though, we may have some answers to this, and we can find our answer most likely from the end of Black Ops Cold War. Now, when I was at Treyarch before Black Ops 6 came out, somebody actually asked the devs about what happened to Bell at the end of that campaign, and Treyarch was very tight-lipped about that for a reason. They didn't want to answer that question, and I think that's because the ending of the Cold War campaign, the final confrontation between Adler and Bell on this cliffside looks suspiciously similar to the Rook, and when you take into account when Adler joined the biotech unit about 10 years ago, it lines up when he would have shot Bell at the end of Cold War. So what most likely happened was that Adler shot Bell, incapacitating him, and then began testing Cradle on him. This would explain the timeline of events, and would also explain some of the weird interactions in this mission.
Make sure you don't mess it up. Guess that makes us a fire team, right, Case? Case. You can dispose of him now. What? No! Enough! He told us what he knows.
Adler insists that Sims call him Case now, and so he does. Adler also commands Case to kill Gusev, just like he would give a command to Bell. This is why Park also seems to already know you during the Iraq mission.
You've been saving that one, haven't you?
It's good seeing you again.
Well, look at that, Adler. We actually agree on something.
These strange little inconsistencies and interactions add up when you consider that the end of Cold War leads almost directly into the start of the Cradle program, and that is the game's big Black Ops twist. What most likely here is that Case is Bell, and it's a cool connection and a really neat twist if it's been a while since you've played that campaign, but it's also kind of what I expected, given that Bell's fate was unclear and Case being yet another faceless, voiceless character was present. I had a feeling Case was going to be Bell when I was getting close to the end of this game too. It's unknown the fate of Jane and Case at the bottom of this helicopter, which I'm sure we'll uncover eventually, but if we know anything from COD campaigns, it's that anybody who dies in a helicopter isn't ever really dead. But regardless of what happens, this was my favorite stuff about this campaign. The entire chase of trying to figure out like who Case really is, trying to nail down Adler's motivations. There is some of that original spirit of Black Ops that shines through every now and again, and I like the dynamic between Adler and Case specifically, and even Jane a little bit, but what I'm disappointed by is honestly the rest of the new characters. Sev and Newman and hell, even Frank Woods were just incredibly underwhelming and forgettable to me. Those characters specifically, they have their entire backstories almost told exclusively through this dialogue in the Rook, which again, all of this writing is appreciated, right? There's a ton of depth to being able to speak to these characters and get information about them, but all of the writing in the world, given the volume, can't make them interesting if they're just not interesting to watch or to interact with. And the same thing with Troy Marshall. Like, I don't dislike him as a character, but he just doesn't, none of these characters left an impact on me, and I would even put Frank Woods into that too. Now, interestingly, we had the pleasure of having the real Frank Woods on our podcast recently, and I talked to James Burns specifically about the new Woods, and we're not talking about the actual voice actor for him, more specifically the writing and how they write Woods now. James Burns seems to think that the new Woods behaves and talks in a way that the real Frank Woods never would speak or behave like.
I wish they had reached out to me. I wish they had said, hey, look, can you want to help us go through this? Would love to have done that. If they had reached out, to give us some narrative stuff, because I wrote a lot of this shit. I was like one of the last surviving members of the original Black Ops team. No one's left there, right?
Also, that the original point of Woods was to represent the best and the most heroic in us, to use James Burns' words. And I get what he's saying, and I feel like the new Woods, this direction, he just doesn't have much to do in this story. Like, just having Frank Woods as wheelchair grandpa isn't that fun, and it works in Black Ops 2 because that was meant to be a plot device where you're wondering, okay, how did we get to this moment? Pretty much the last time we saw Woods, he was out there being a badass, and now he's like in this nursing home wheelchair, you know? It was this plot device choice that was there for a reason, where like they now have to fit Frank Woods in given the current circumstances, and he got injured in Panama and now he's kind of just sitting around. I don't know, I just felt really underwhelmed by the new characters specifically, and also Woods. Now what I find fascinating really is the community reaction to this campaign. It seems kind of split down the middle. While I do think most people are generally positive on this one, there's a lot of people that I figured would like this campaign a lot, but just didn't. A lot of people were somewhat disappointed by the outcome and the storytelling of this campaign specifically. I'd be curious for you all to tell me why you did or didn't like this campaign, but for me, I guess like just based on the pre-reveal material and stuff, I don't really know what I was expecting, but it wasn't this, and I just feel very let down by the new cast that they were writing so heavily on. And another thing I do want to point out in regards to the spirit of Black Ops is that this campaign is lacking any kind of moment that makes me genuinely uncomfortable. There are times in Black Ops 1 and in Black Ops 2 and in BO3, there are some moments that are literally burned into my brain, and there's none of that in Black Ops 6. It feels like this campaign is missing its bite, and that's why I feel like it's kind of a Modern Warfare campaign trying its best to imitate a Black Ops campaign. For me, it goes back to the whole pushing boundaries thing. This is playing it safe, so to speak. I felt like Cold War and Black Ops 6 are safe Black Ops campaigns where they're not necessarily pushing the boundaries of storytelling like they were previously. And that being said, it's still a very good campaign. It's competent, it's solid. Like I said, I think the gameplay might be the best campaign we've ever gotten, to be quite honest. But even so, I still can't help but feel that it's missing its razor edge. And interestingly enough, someone in our Treyarch session actually asked the devs if that mission was going to be in the game or if that was going to be touched on at all, and they said absolutely not. And listen, I'm not saying they should have included that. Like, that did not need to be in this story if it wasn't for a purpose. But would it have shocked me? Definitely. Would have had been memorable? Yeah, absolutely. But it's that kind of edge that I'm not sure if they were even going to think about approaching. Every single one of the individual components that make up this campaign are honestly really cool in their own right, but there isn't that boundary-pushing storytelling to go alongside it that really makes it unforgettable. There are Black Ops campaigns, especially the old ones, that I'll play and I'll think about for days. As soon as I was done with this one, it never really crossed my mind again, and it hasn't stuck with me. And I want to be crystal clear, I don't dislike this campaign. I think Raven did a fantastic job on this, and I'm sure they put hours and literally years passionately developing this one. Just for me personally, I don't feel like the storytelling is quite what I want out of a Black Ops title. I think that carries a lot of weight to it, and I just think their methods of storytelling are a little bit different now, and they kind of have to play it a bit more safe for a variety of reasons. And I don't even really know how to wrap this segment up, honestly, because people want to know, do I love it or hate it? It's like, I mean, I love the gameplay. I truly think it's probably the best COD campaign gameplay-wise we've gotten, and the story at least makes sense, and you can follow along with what's happening. That is a lot more than can be said about many of the recent COD campaigns. It's just that it's a little bit predictable for me, and it's not that signature Black Ops truly mind-bending value that we normally get out of these. So it's okay in the storytelling capacity, but not really what I'm looking for personally. Black Ops 6's multiplayer is a really interesting topic because this multiplayer is quite different to many of the ones we've had in years prior, even though it may not appear like that on the surface. In many ways, I would describe Black Ops 6 as kind of a love letter to the Call of Duty community. Its multiplayer definitely feels like it's trying to emulate a lot of those classic moments that we all fell in love with back in the day. For example, the return of very powerful kill streaks is appreciated, the classic prestige system as opposed to the traditional seasonal system that Call of Duty has been running on for the past few years was certainly a welcome change by most people. Even the class system has been tightened up and a bit more simplified. While it still does operate off the Call of Duty gunsmith idea that was added in Modern Warfare 2019, it feels a lot more akin to the Pick 10 system that the classic Treyarch Call of Duty multiplayers were built on years ago. And while we're on the topic of the classics, there are also plenty of maps that that have been brought back from the past, things from Black Ops 1 and 2 specifically, things that would work really well on this more traditional boots on the ground style of gameplay. However, boots on the ground may not necessarily be the right way to describe this because Omni movement has fundamentally changed everything for Call of Duty, and the big innovation this year was introducing a totally brand new from the ground up movement kit. Now, just as a funny side note, I would like to point out that even though Treyarch claims that this is the first time Omni movement has been in Call of Duty, I guess you could say that's true. Technically, Call of Duty 1 had Omni movement before Black Ops 6. There's a specific mission mechanic where you get sprint in COD 1, and it's literally Omni movement before they did it here. It's not obviously as polished, but I just think it's kind of funny. Anyways, the point is, Treyarch spent so much time introducing this brand new movement system that fundamentally changes how the game is played. You can now move, slide, and sprint in any direction, and this completely changes the flow of combat in good and bad ways. However, what it certainly has done is sped up the pace of gameplay. And when I was thinking what I wanted to talk about in this review, I originally put down that I feel like Omni movement and specifically tac sprint just don't work well together. In base Black Ops 6, you can use Omni movement, you can sprint in any direction, however, you can only still tac sprint forward, and I always felt like those were kind of at odds with each other, and tac sprint didn't really belong in the game. And at some point during the seasons of Black Ops 6, Treyarch would add a perk called Slipstream. This actually removes your tac sprint, but increases your base movement speed, and this changed everything. I actually had a whole section on why tac sprint doesn't work with Omni movement, but I'm just gonna skip past most of it because honestly, I just use Slipstream now, and that has alleviated 100% of my problems. I think going forward, Call of Duty is probably gonna do Omni movement. They need to get rid of tac sprint. I think that made sense in a game where the sprinting was more linear, but we can get rid of tac sprint in favor of this new, more fluid and omnidirectional system. I literally felt like that episode of SpongeBob when Patrick like gets hit in the head and then like the neurons connect in his brain. I was like, why was this not the base movement from the start? Why do we even have tac sprint in the game if we're able to move in any direction now? And since playing with Slipstream, it has actually made my multiplayer experience so much better. Now, it definitely has increased the pace of the game. This is a community criticism that I've been seeing cropping up more and more, and I feel like I've paid attention to this on the internet ever since the release of Black Ops 6. People have been proclaiming, specifically with this COD, more than anything else. I've seen so many comments going, man, I'm getting too old for this, or I just can't keep up anymore, right? The games have gotten so fast that there is only a subset of the players that are able to mechanically keep up with the movement. Now, personally speaking, I really enjoy fast-paced shooters, and COD has always been on the faster side, but even I'll admit Black Ops 6 is a little bit fast, and I think it's not necessarily all down to the mechanics. I think it has to do with both the respawn system and the map design. When we were at Treyarch before the game came out, they were telling us about the brand new maps Black Ops 6 was going to feature, and they said, we listened to the data, and our data shows that players like small maps. You know, the popularity of Shipment in Nuketown obviously is a key point to why they would make that decision. And I'm not gonna lie, most COD fans enjoy playing Nuketown, or they enjoy playing Shipment sometimes. It's just the data is failing to account for why sometimes people play these maps. A lot of people only grind Shipment in Nuketown, for example, to grind camos on guns. They're not playing it necessarily for the love of that map. Most people do like small maps, but because they got this from their data set, they went and made almost every single map in Black Ops 6 definitely on the small side. There are a few of what I would consider to be maybe medium maps. There are no large maps to speak of, and the end result of this is that everything feels like Nuketown. And typically, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I feel like that's kind of a strange thing to complain about, but it just means that every match of Black Ops 6 feels the same. I have to go and literally disable the Nuketown 24/7 playlist when I'm playing multiplayer because otherwise that's all I get. But even when I disable Nuketown, I can't avoid some of these really tiny maps, and I feel like between the map design and also the time to kill, and specifically the respawn system, it's all fundamentally engineered to reduce the amount of time between interactions. You die and the gameplay loop is respawn and get into another gunfight, and typically in some of the older Call of Duty games, this would be like maybe 7 to 10 seconds before you would start engaging in another gunfight. But in Black Ops 6, they've gotten that down to like 2 or 3 seconds, and I think they want to make this gameplay loop that is so tight that never ever lets off the gas. And I can understand making a fast-paced experience, but now I feel like it removes removes much of the strategy that was involved in older Call of Duty multiplayer games for what strategy there were. Because the action is happening so quickly and there's almost no downtime, like it feels like the video game equivalent of just actually scrolling TikTok. Look, COD's always been arcadey, and I don't have any problem with a fast-paced shooter, but the problem with Black Ops 6, as far as I can tell, is that it doesn't give itself room to breathe. Even on some of its larger maps, it seems the respawn system is engineered so that you're going to get into a gunfight in the next couple of seconds. They very rarely ever put you on like the other side of the map, really far away from enemies, so that you actually have time to kind of like set up and reposition and stuff. You're going to find somebody in maybe 5 seconds at the most. Now, I'm no expert on respawn systems, and perhaps it's not that different to some of the classic COD games, but a big part of it is now how quickly we can get around the map. Just look at this gameplay compared to how quickly you can get around on the original Nuketown. We were not meant to be able to maneuver the map like this. Like, you can get around Nuketown on Black Ops 6 faster than you can on the Black Ops 3 version, and you have jetpacks in that game. Now, besides the pace of gameplay being a point of contention, I do want to quickly talk about the perk system and the create a class. I touched on it earlier, where it still does feature the gunsmith. It feels a lot more pick 10 as opposed to how it did in the past, but they do have a very unique perk system in which you have 3 options to choose from, either red, blue, or green, and they all come in different packs. And if you run 3 of the same perk color, you get an extra bonus, or what you might consider an additional perk. This is meant to bolster certain playstyles. For example, if you like to kind of hang back and do recon, if you run triple blue, you can see the enemies through walls for a couple of seconds when you respawn. If you're a very aggressive player and you like to get into the action, I typically run triple red. This is, definitely cut out for that. It's a very interesting system and definitely harkens back to what I love about classic Call of Duty multiplayer, and it's definitely well done here. Going in tandem with the perk system and the create a class is kill streaks, and I will say I think they're excellent in this game. To be honest, streaks are powerful, they're satisfying to get again, but they are rather difficult to come by. The kill streak inflation has hit this game hard as hell. Do y'all remember in the classic MW2 when you could run hardline and get 2 kills for a UAV? In this game, you need bare minimum 5.5, if not 6 kills to get just a UAV. And don't even get me started on some of the big kill streaks. You damn near have to get a nuke to get the Dreadnought. I mean, it's just not, I haven't even gotten that yet because it's just, I feel like I don't run it because I know I'm most likely not gonna get it in my games. While I am really thankful they got rid of that whack-ass kill streak system from Cold War, I don't know if y'all remember that, but is you would get a kill and then you would get a multiplier added to your score, and then like getting more kills would increase the multiplier. It was really confusing, but your streaks never actually reset at all upon death. I mean, a lot of the streaks were insanely high scores, but they would never actually go back to 0, so they were attainable if you did get a streak. It was just kind of weird and confusing, and I didn't like it at all. In Black Ops 6, however, streaks are a lot more difficult to come by. All of that being said, however, as difficult as they are to come by, I do think this has the advantage of making them more satisfying when you get them and more enjoyable to use because they're allowed to be more powerful so that they don't get out of hand. There isn't really a whole lot of kill streak spam in this multiplayer, which is nice, but when kill streaks do get called in, they are usually pretty devastating. I'm also going to say that BO6 multiplayer is my favorite MP experience from Treyarchs since Black Ops 3. I like this far more than Cold War. I like it a lot better than Black Ops 4, and while it definitely isn't perfect, I think Omni Movement is the closest we've had to having a truly free-form, flowing movement system once again, which I really enjoy, and I just think that the bones and the structure of this multiplayer are good, and at the end of the day, it's just fun. Now, one of the things that I'm the most disappointed by in this multiplayer is actually not anything to do with the gameplay systems whatsoever. I was trying to figure out where in the video I wanted to talk about this subject, and I considered it putting it near the beginning, but I decided I'm going to put it in the MP slot because I feel like this is where it's primarily affected at. The store in this game is outright ridiculous. I get Call of Duty is making a lot of their money through microtransactions that are completely optional. That's fair, but I feel like Black Ops 6 has gotten to a point where instead of making a game with, an add-on of some additional microtransaction bundles you can buy, it feels like Activision and Call of Duty now are making a store with a game for a vehicle to sell you through.
Well, guess what? If we're really doing this, we've got to get financially creative. Financially creative. Financially creative. financially creative.
In other words, it feels like they're primarily making an online store that just also happens to have a video game attached to it. And this is one of those things that I also talked to Treyarch about when I was there, and I was asking them if they plan on being able to retain the identity of the multiplayer experience as the year goes on. And they told me that they're going to try to, but they also know that people like crazy stuff. And look, to be totally fair, I like crazy stuff too, but in the proper doses and in the right amounts. I feel like the amount of collaboration fatigue for Black Ops 6 was off the charts. We had this like Squid Game thing and this Ninja Turtles thing and like all of these collabs that slowly but surely start to erode the identity of what this game actually is. Each and every single new bundle collab, the fabric of what Black Ops 6 is starts to wash out a little bit. And what I also realized is that I feel like there is no possible way that they haven't been using AI to shovel out a lot of these calling cards and emblems that are featured in the store. Not to mention, God forbid you log onto the game during a new season, you get hit with like the seasonal cutscene, and then you get the Battle Pass cutscene, and then you get the Battle Pass store pop-up, and then the Black Cell pop-up, and then all these other things. And honestly, I'm okay with Call of Duty giving microtransactions and having a store, but I just have to point out that in Black Ops 6 in particular, the store and the monetization is so aggressive. Normally when I'm reviewing a Call of Duty game, I'm discussing the pros and cons of a lot of the mechanics and gameplay design choices, and specifically when it comes to COD multiplayer, I typically am critiquing how they designed the game. But to be honest with you, I can't really do that here, partly because I actually really like Black Ops 6 multiplayer for the most part. I mean, every map does kind of feel the same, but besides that, I feel like it's fun and it has good structure. What I really have complaints about is honestly the store, which is so weird for me to say because I usually just don't care about that stuff at all, but it is so unbelievably aggressive here that I have to say something. And also, what I don't understand is despite Call of Duty being the #1 best-selling game again this year and their extremely aggressive microtransaction store, how Microsoft still considered Black Ops 6 to be a financial letdown. That I have no idea. But anyways, besides all of that, the multiplayer is genuinely a lot of fun. I do think that there's an interesting thing going on where we're seeing a lot of Call of Duty players kind of realize that maybe the game isn't for them anymore, and perhaps the gameplay has gotten so fast that it's no longer appealing to the people that started the original series so long ago. So first of all, I do find it a little bit weird that the mode literally has to be called round-based zombies, because it's like minus MWZ and Outbreak, that's kind of just what zombies is in the first place, you know what I mean? Like, this just makes me think that they're experimenting with other modes potentially for the future, and it's important to differentiate between round-based zombies to all of the other modes that they may or may not be developing. But round-based zombies in this context is not to be confused with classic zombies, and that is a crucial delineation because Black Ops 6 zombies would prominently feature a lot of the same design philosophies from the more recent and modern Call of Duty Zombies iterations, yet expand upon itself with some brand new ones as well. Now, I've been an overall really big fan, a big critic, and somebody who genuinely loves the approach to new zombies in a lot of ways. I've had the pleasure of giving feedback to Treyarch on this game directly, and honestly, when I look at 90% of my criticisms from Cold War zombies specifically, it does seem like most of those were addressed and at least to some degree resolved in BO6. However, it does introduce a whole new set of problems for this game specifically that I haven't really seen affect any other game quite in the way that it does here. Okay, but let's start big picture. What exactly is going on in Black Ops 6 Zombies? Because as opposed to Cold War, this takes a much more straightforward round-based zombies map approach, whereas Cold War was kind of divided into some round-based maps plus a brand new mode called Outbreak that was more of this open world style formula. However, this is totally round-based, and each and every single map looks to serve a slightly different function. But before we dive into the maps, let's take a look at some of the new systems BO6 introduced compared to its prior earlier iterations. First of all, some of the returning features would be stuff like weapon rarities, the pack-a-punch system, and even the armor, although it's a little bit different here. And we would also see the return of Gobblegum that haven't appeared since Black Ops 3. I mean, we did have elixirs in BO4, but that's a little bit of a different system. Largely, what Black Ops 6 Zombies was trying to accomplish is taking inspiration from BO3 and integrating it into the systems that they've built on in Cold War and expand upon that further. And I would say insofar as that goal, they definitely achieved that. So when you talk about direct improvements to the mode, one of the things that Modern Zombies delineates itself from Classic is that this is less of a sandbox survival and more of a action RPG where you sort of build craft. And they've been leaning into that approach ever since BO4, but really went all in during Cold War. And I absolutely hated the Ethereum upgrade menu. You grind these materials and then get permanent upgrades for your perks and your weapons and stuff that I just did not care for at all. I don't like the idea of upgrading things out of game in a menu to begin with, and Cold War really didn't work for me in that capacity. Black Ops 6 takes a bit of a different approach, and instead of the Ethereum upgrade tree, you have this system called augments, where after grinding a certain amount of XP, you unlock these tracks which give you different abilities for some of your field upgrades or your perks, and you can essentially build a perk with a major and minor augment to slightly alter its effectiveness and its use cases. This system is much better than the Ethereum upgrade tree where you just one and done it and then never think about it again. There's actually a little bit of thought going into this one about maybe the specific weapon you're using or the particular encounter you're going to be in, and there are trade-offs to be made. It's not like you just upgrade a perk fully and it's just simply better. You have to pick and choose which augments are going to suit you the best, and you have to sacrifice all of the other ones that you're not going to be running. I do enjoy the system much more than Ethereum upgrade trees, although, again, if I had it my way, all of the upgrading of your perks, etc. would be done in-game somehow. You do have the same fundamental structure of weapon rarity and pack-a-punch, and you even have salvage again. However, in Cold War Zombies, there were two different kinds of scrap. There was like this low-grade green one and then a high-grade blue one. They have completely condensed that, and now there's only one kind of salvage, meaning there's only two currencies in game. There's essence and just whatever salvage you happen to have. This system works far better because, to be honest, splitting between two salvage currencies was kind of stupid and a little bit confusing, so I'm glad they seem to have figured that out here. As opposed to Cold War, instead of buying armor using salvage, you actually buy bigger vests through essence, and the things that salvage are used for are like weapon upgrades, alternate ammo types, and most commonly craftables that you can build on this bench. And I do enjoy the system. However, I think one of the problems is that craftables do make every map sandbox feel more or less the same. You have the same equipment on every single map, and that is another issue that I had with Cold War that I still have in Black Ops 6. Despite that still, I think all of the new additions and changes of the fundamental gameplay systems in the formula are an objective step up from Cold War. Many of those things that needed refinement or could be further expanded upon were done so here, and I'm proud to say that. One of my absolute favorite things they've done with Black Ops 6 Zombies is make guns feel unique when pack-a-punched again. One of my criticisms of Cold War was that every weapon was more or less the same through the different gunsmith attachments, and then upgrading it didn't really give it its own personality, whereas back in like Black Ops 1, upgrading a gun might give it a unique attribute that no other weapon would have. The ballistic knife can, revive people, the M16 gets a grenade launcher, you name it. They actually made their new pack-a-punch system compatible with that old one, and I truly think this is such an underappreciated part of BO6 Zombies. You might upgrade the KSV, and this gets an increase in fire rate when pack-a-punched, or you could upgrade the SVD that becomes a shotgun sniper hybrid. It's a way to make weapons fun and unique and interesting again, while still being compatible with their new pack-a-punch system that they're going for. It's amazing. However, sadly, what has not been good, and this could be a 2-hour video on its own, so we'll condense it a bit here, is the story and the way that they're delivering it. Specifically, Black Ops 6 did something kind of crazy, and they hinted at it prior in the Dark Ether, but they canonized the Chaos story from Black Ops 4, that separate story that was not related to Ether. That is actually now canon to the zombie storyline here, and opening that, created so many new possibilities that they've done pretty much nothing interesting with. And also, they haven't really done anything interesting with the original, story openings that were happening in Cold War either. We ended off Cold War, trying to find Richtofen and see what he was doing. I thought we were going to start Black Ops 6 encountering Richtofen and kind of hitting the ground running, but now Black Ops 6 is almost over and we just now met Richtofen. The game has been been wheel spinning for like 3 or 4 maps. The storytelling structure and the contents thereof have been the most disappointing part of BO6, and besides all of the wheel spinning, there isn't anything to really talk about here, to be honest. So I do want to talk briefly about each individual map because they did something that I, was a big proponent of with Cold War and I think was really smart for this game. Black Ops 6 launched with Liberty Falls and Terminus, and I think this was an excellent idea because while Liberty Falls was met with some skepticism before the game released, I think a lot of people now have come to appreciate it for what it is. That map is not groundbreaking or anything, but I don't think it's really trying to be. That map is a smaller scale experience where it's a little bit more casual. You can just jump on and kill zombies. It's essentially the same dynamic as the Giant had to Shadows of Evil in Black Ops 3, where you have this map that's more challenging and in-depth, and when you want that deeper experience, it's there for you, but sometimes when you just want to jump on and kill zombies, that is there as a casual counterbalance, and I think Liberty Falls is definitely not the most zombies feeling map we've ever had, and it's very okay. It's actually better than I was expecting. There is a main Easter egg to it as well, and it's totally casually fine to play. I want to discuss the main Easter eggs and the quest design of a lot of these maps. So one of my biggest criticisms of Cold War Zombies is even though that game was meant to be an introductory zombies mode, they made the main quests very on the rails and super straightforward and kind of held your hand through it. I did think the quests were fun from a gameplay perspective, but yeah, it was a little bit handholdy at times, and it seems like in Black Ops 6 they have rectified that a lot, where beyond getting to Pack-a-Punch, there's pretty much no hints or anything else of what you need to do, and the quest design has got significantly more advanced since that prior game. Specifically, the main Easter eggs of Terminus, Citadel de Mor, and Shattered Veil have improved remarkably when it comes to step depth and quest, replayability. These Easter eggs are awesome. They are almost a perfect balance of what I consider to be really fun gameplay challenges and some more intellectual puzzles. The quests of Liberty Falls and the Tomb are good, but they're not anything necessarily groundbreaking, but they're casually fun and can be done pretty quickly as well. And besides the main quest, each and every single map is loaded with tons of side Easter eggs, and this has been a little bit of a point of contention for me because while I can really appreciate what Black Ops 6 is trying to do with side Easter eggs, I mean, if you think back to Cold War, D Machine had virtually no side Easter eggs to speak of. There's literally like 1 or 2, maybe 3. However, in these games, there's much more side Easter eggs, there's more depth to them, and specifically, there are also different rewards. However, this is kind of one of those things that I hope they figure out soon, because many of the rewards for doing side Easter eggs are just stuff like you're already going to get in-game anyways. They might be like an ether tool, or a free perk, or essence, or something like that. Very rarely do you ever get a side Easter egg reward that is something that you cannot otherwise obtain in-game, which in my opinion should be what side Easter eggs are for. The best case in point example is golden armor on the Tomb. This is a mechanic and a reward that you cannot get any other way in game. Doesn't matter how much you grind or how much you spend essence, you cannot get this item unless you do this quest. However, that's pretty much one of the only unique rewards you can go after realistically.
We don't want, I'm like, nope, we're not shooting rocks. We don't want, I'm like, nope, we're not shooting rocks. Nope, we're not shooting rocks. Nope, we're not shooting rocks.
Even upon completing a main Easter egg, the rewards you get after the boss fights are typically just the flawless Ethereum crystals, which upgrades your gun to tier 3, a bunch of weapons that you probably can get in-game already, and a wonder weapon or a ray gun. It's like stuff that you most likely already have or can get very easily. There's no in-game unique rewards mechanically that you can only get by doing a side Easter egg or even a main Easter egg for that matter. I just think back to some older maps like Mob of the Dead, getting the Hell's Retriever, but then doing the Easter egg to get the Hell's Redeemer. That's the only way you can acquire that item. Or, stuff on like Shadows of Evil, getting the Margwa hat or the Panzer hat on Der Eisendrache. Those very obscure things that, you're not gonna buy a Panzer hat on DE. You have to do this quest in order to get it. Is it worth it? That's debatable, but still, you get my point. Side Easter eggs, for the most part, should be their own unique reward. A free perk every now and again is nice, but if you play long enough enough, you're going to get to a point anyways where it makes that irrelevant. You should still be incentivized to do side Easter eggs, even if you're hypothetically fully set up through all of the traditional methods in the game. Regardless of how you feel about BO6, you have to admit that the boss fights have been marked improvements to their prior game, specifically the bosses on Terminus, which is Patient 13, the boss on Citadel, who is the Guardian, and on Shattered Vale, the Z-Rex. The only maps that don't have bosses technically are Liberty Falls and the Tomb. You know, one of these is just a beefed up HVT, more or less, and the other one is, it's a mirror.
Whatever your plan is for bringing back Maxis, it better be good.
The boss design for all of these, I mean specifically these three, have been nothing short of fantastic. Every boss has a different strategy, they have a different approach to how you have to play them. There's a lot of depth to many of these. Specifically the Guardian has so many little mechanics to understand that it can make that fight feel very satisfying when you finally figure it out. I look back at previous boss fights in Cold War like Firebase C and the pathetic Orda that you fight at the end where you can literally rinse the health bar in about 5 seconds. These fights are nothing like that. These are more engaging, they're more fun, and they're more of a spectacle as well. Now, something I found particularly interesting is that even though they marketed this as a round-based zombies mode, a lot of people in the zombies community are still yearning for a classic zombies mode. And I think what a lot of people mean by this is a zombies mode without armor, you know, without weapon rarities and stuff like that. All of the modern systems that specifically Cold War and then on has introduced. And a lot of people think that you could just have a classic zombies mode with all of these things removed and just leave it at that. But these maps and these systems and, you know, the way that the gameplay works would not fit well at all just being a classic mode. In order to make classic zombies, you would literally have to rethink everything about this game and build it back from the ground up for it to feel good again. It's just, I think what people are feeling and noticing is that modern zombies is much more geared towards being an FPS action adventure RPG, when a lot of people I think are missing the sandbox survival oriented mode. I mean, there is technically survival in this game, but it's not really the emphasis. Like, clearly the game has moved towards you completing quests and, you know, going on your adventure and getting more powerful in these RPG-esque mechanics. There is still room for survival, and that is the core of the game still, I suppose, but that leads into another discussion, which is high rounds, and I don't find high rounds to be enjoyable at all, pretty much, in Black Ops 6. This is the game I've high rounded the least on because I just don't find it engaging or enjoyable, specifically because the way that the crafting table works, the most powerful, important item in the game is this mutant injection that turns you into a mangler and makes you invincible. I made a whole almost 40-minute video about why I don't think this system works and why it's not satisfying to play, but I really dislike high rounds in BO6. It's my least favorite aspect to the mode, and despite all of the other good things they've done with Easter egg quest design and building out these brand new systems, I mean, think about how ironic this is. Black Ops 6 did all of this work to make Omni movement and this really advanced movement system and even integrated it into zombies. And in the game where we theoretically have the most interesting and advanced movement, this is also the game in which getting to high rounds requires you to move around the least. That's so strange to me, and I just think about the possibilities that if they kind of rethought the game and as far as like integrating Omni movement into it, I feel like you should be incentivized to get good at Omni movement, and that should really be the determiner for high rounds. When I think about some of the difficult training strategies for high rounds back in the day, they required really precise movement, and I feel like there's so much possibility with making a satisfying gameplay loop integrating Omni movement into that, but they have not done that in Black Ops 6 whatsoever. Hopefully they can somehow figure that out in their next game. That would be lovely, and I would probably be much more incentivized to play high rounds, but I just don't care about them at all in this game, which is kind of a shame because the maps could be really fun for high rounds if they wanted. And it's also that every map more or less plays the same when it comes to high rounds, because once the Wonder Weapon stops dealing enough damage to viably get to high rounds, you have really no other choice but then to rely on the crafting table, and the crafting table has the same items across the board. Think of how cool it would be if there was specific equipment that you could only get on the Tomb, for example, or a specific lethal item that was unique to the Shattered Vale. Maybe these things could be the key to getting high rounds, and it would go a long way into making each map feel distinct, because for the most part, the maps have been interesting. I think a lot of them share similar design philosophies, but stuff like Terminus and Citadel and Shattered Veil are meant to be these deep experiences, whereas Liberty Falls and the Tomb are meant to be these more casual counterbalance maps where they're smaller scale, they're more condensed, they still have secrets and their, respective quests, but they're not as depthful as some of the others. To be honest, while many of these maps are of extremely high quality and they play very well, a lot of them I think are missing that it factor, right? That make it a top 5 map of all time. I think Citadel des Morts is probably the best map in the game, but even then it's still lacking that X factor, that unmistakable sauce that really makes a map stand out, like a Mob of the Dead, a Shadows of Evil, or a Dryzen Draka. But the Zombies maps have all been consistently good, but none of them have been a super crazy standout amongst the entire lineup of COD Zombies history, which, to be fair, is a tough order to fill, but at the same time, there hasn't been anything that's transcended some of my favorite experiences of all time. While I feel many objective improvements have been made to the Black Ops 6 Zombies formula over the years since Cold War, to me, this game feels like the bigger brother to that one, especially in regards to gameplay structure, enemy design, and the emphasis on the sandbox elements with Gobblegum, which to me are still great here, but were done a bit better in Black Ops 3. What Black Ops 6 has been really hit hard by are the outside forces surrounding the game that we laid out at the beginning of the video. I touched on the fact that Samantha Maxis is gone and Julie Nathanson was replaced by another voice actor, and there have been some other actors who are also participating in the same strike, and this has resulted in some of the most awkward, bad, and just underwhelming story moments ever. I mean, a bunch of maps don't even have intro cutscenes. The Liberty Falls intro cinematic was most likely the actual intro for the Shattered Veil, but they had to put this one up front for the launch of the game. Citadel's intro is hella boring and forgettable, and the Tomb's outro is laughably silly. Like, you hear the intriguing, mystical intro of the Chaos Story music begin to play and kick in, and when the team approaches the Sentinel artifact, only for them to just be cut off by Raptor 1 at the LZ. It's just so jarring, and everything about the story and narrative stuff has been really strange with this game. Whether that be down to weird writing choices or the actor strike taking a significant toll, either way, it does not bode well for the vibes that the game is going for or making moments that are incredibly memorable and interesting. While I can confidently say that I am satisfied with most aspects of the gameplay loop and the feature direction, minus a couple stuff like high rounds and the severe case of menu gameplay, all in all, what I am consistently the most let down by is the lack of any interesting story developing whatsoever. I mean, it's a real tragedy because in some ways, I wonder what would happen if Treyarch just started dropping Zombies experiences that maybe in no way, shape, or form worry about connecting to the current story or gameplay systems. And no, I'm not talking about doing like a chaos story thing, more like how Mob of the Dead was different in relation to Transit and Die Rise. That map, despite being on the exact same game, is a totally different experience to Transit and Die Rise, and up to that point, nobody knew if it even connected from a story perspective, but also the gameplay systems were so novel that it brought this entirely refreshing take on COD Zombies that fundamentally revitalized that game, and I feel like maybe every once in a while doing something like that for Zombies might be an interesting spin on the formula, but I feel like they've actually nailed down the systems of what they would like to do now. Classic COD Zombies used to make systems to fit maps. Modern COD Zombies makes maps to fit their systems. And that's not necessarily bad because I happen to enjoy much of the new systems quite a lot. However, it is just a very different approach to the Zombies design philosophy than you might say what classic zombie fans are used to. The current developments of Black Ops 6 Zombie season are still going on, so I'm sure I'm going to have a lot more to say someday after all is said and done, but the point is, Black Ops 6 is comparatively to Cold War in most ways has been a remarkable improvement. Such genuine advancements in design have led to some incredible maps, unforgettable moments, and an extremely solid core gameplay loop. However, it's been consistently plagued by issues that Treyarch either refuse to address or forces totally outside of their control have led to a degradation of what could possibly be one of the greatest COD zombie games ever. Treyarch has also done an amazing job at listening to feedback. While sometimes I feel like my criticisms can come off as really harsh, it's only because I care a lot about this mode and I want to see it succeed, so I try to point out its weak spots, which Treyarch have been very receptive to, which I'm thankful about. Black Ops 6 is nowhere near perfect, and it's missing much of what I would consider to be crucial pieces of the puzzle to make an unforgettable, timeless classic, but they certainly have taken massive strides in improving the gameplay that was first introduced in Cold War and taking it to brand new heights. Only time will tell how they finish off the rest of the final seasons. Whether it's with high momentum or stumbling over the finish line is yet to be seen. I'm optimistic yet realistic about what might happen, and if they can continue an upward trajectory moving into their next game, I think Call of Duty Zombies will still be in a really good spot overall. I think Black Ops 6 is a beautiful game that's just unfortunately plagued with so many issues that are some in their control and some completely outside their control, which is rather unfortunate because it should be able to stand on its own feet. It has had to face many hurdles and struggles, and some of their own making and some completely outside the realm of their control. Overall, the experience does have a lot to offer. This is some of the most content we've gotten in a long time. The campaign visually is amazing and I think has some great moments, but to be honest, it misses the mark a little bit for me of what I really want out of a Black Ops story. The multiplayer is honestly great mechanically, and Omni Movement is some of the most fun I've had in COD MP in quite some time. It's just unfortunately really aggressively plagued by the microtransaction store and the absolute collaboration fatigue that kind of just erodes of what the identity of the multiplayer even is. And Zombies, to be real, is probably my favorite COD Zombies since Black Ops 3 or 4. Black Ops 6 Zombies is fantastic. It's unfortunately also been hit by some of these very tragic issues, with voice actors leaving and the story going in a really weird direction, but the gameplay is incredibly solid. It has some awesome maps, and I love the direction they're taking it. Most of what I dislike about Black Ops 6 big picture are things that are either outside of their control or something that they can't address very easily. Overall, I would say I'm very happy with the game. It is by no means flawless. I think it's easy to say that Black Ops 6 is a beautiful disaster.